time because the university system is inherently challenging to find your way around. So if you haven't been here before, it's very easy to get lost. And I've been working here at the university for 4 years and I still can't find some buildings and I have to go somewhere that I haven't been before. So welcome. I'd like to welcome you all here this evening to our parent workshop around children's self-regulation. But before we begin, I would like to just acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we stand, the Wadi Wadi people of the Dharawal Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend those respects to any elders that we have here this evening, and welcome any Aboriginal guests and all of you here as well. So tonight we're going to give you, it's kind of a buckle your seatbelt, and we're going to do a pretty fast journey through what self-regulation looks like, what it is, why is it significant in your child's life, and the role it plays, and what role we play in supporting children's self-regulatory behaviours, and the significant role and the significant responsibility that we have as parents and educators in terms of supporting children's self-regulation. And then we're going to take a little look at how you can actually reflect on your approaches to parenting and how you can think about some of the things that you already do but don a self-regulatory lens. And so be much more intentional in terms of those processes. And then we'll finish the talk looking at some specific activities that you can do to promote the different types of self-regulation behaviours that we want to encourage in children. So things that are supportive of behavioural regulation or emotional regulation, or also cognitive regulation in terms of their attentional capacity. Now, as I said, it's only 45 minutes tonight, so we're going to start with some information and then we'll open the floor up at the end for some Q&A and questions. But we'll also have a link to a website that Stephen and myself have been working on for the last 6 months that we've been working mostly with educators around that, but we'd also like to provide access to that for you as parents, and there's a whole lot of activities and things, and that's freely available on that website, so you can access that, and we'll provide a link. But first of all, we might just tell you a little bit about ourselves.
So you have two of us here tonight. I'm Neilsen-Hewett. I'm a researcher here at Early Start. I spend the majority of my time trying to understand what early self-regulation is, how it develops over time, and what sorts of things we can do to support it. And my partner in crime here is Cathrine.
Who, I just realised I'm wearing exactly the same dress as you. How's that?
It's good.
I don't know if that's good or not. Actually, maybe it looks like I don't shop as much as I do. So my name is Cathrine Neilsen-Hewett, and I'm the director of the early years here at the University of Wollongong, and I'm also a researcher in Early Start with Stephen, and we do a lot of work together, but my priority over the last 3 to 4 years is really about supporting educators and how they can develop effective pedagogy practices within the early childhood education care environment in terms of supporting self-regulation abilities. And that's quite critical because researchers who have started studying self-regulation actually suggest it's the biological basis of school readiness, and it's fundamental to children's success. And we'll talk a little bit about tonight why that age between 3 and 5 is our window of opportunity in terms of really fostering those positive skills. So I'm going to hand you over to Steve first.
A little bit of an apology first. We only have one mic that works in the room, and rather than taking off the clip and passing it back and forth, I'm going to try and use my best outside voice. But if I'm not talking loud enough, just let me know and I'll try and pipe up a little bit more as well. Also, I'm going to note that we have chocolates out. Yes, they are unwrapped. We haven't tampered with them. They're all right. We do have plans for those. We've already eaten them. That's all right, too. We can understand. You get a little bit peckish along the way. That's all right as well. Feel free to eat it. We have some more at the back. Just letting you know that we do have some plans for those.
And so we will be judging you.
We did intentionally unwrap them. So we thought we'd start with an overview of what we mean by self-regulation when we say self-regulation. And the reason why we felt this is important is because there's all sorts of different ideas and definitions out there about what self-regulation is and what the boundaries are of that definition. When we're referring to self-regulation, and the way that we tend to research it and try and understand it is our ability to control our attention and our thinking, our ability to control our behaviors, our social interactions, and our emotional reactions, even when it might be difficult to do so. So self-regulation underpins things like being able to stop doing something that I might not want to stop doing. I'm playing, but it's lunchtime. Can I pack up from play, even though I might want to keep playing so that I can have lunch? Or even start doing things that I might not really want to do. So can I go and brush my teeth, even though I really don't want to? And children who are well self-regulated can make those sorts of starts and stops, even if it conflicts with what they really like to do. It also underpins things like sustaining attention and resisting distraction, for example, through an entire story. Enduring temptations and delaying gratification. I've noticed at Woolies and a number of different checkouts, there's the lolly-free aisle now to try and get those temptations out of there, but how well can we resist those sorts of temptations or delay them? Can we wait our turn? If we're playing a game and we know what the next move is, can we still withhold and wait until it comes back around? One of the games that we've played with a lot of children now is a memory card matching game. Find a pair, and if you find a pair, you get to keep it and you get to go again. That can be a really challenging situation for a young child. If you're watching keenly and someone takes a turn, even if they don't get a pair, if you spot where that pair is, you immediately want to go. I know where that pair is, I want to take my turn now, and it becomes quite difficult to wait your turn. So can we wait our turn? Can we consider the consequences of our actions? Are we impulsive and we just do the thing that comes immediately to mind, the thing that we have this urge to do? Or can we pause? Can we take a second? Think about what the best course of action might be. And what happens if we face a challenging task? Something that's difficult, something that we might not get right straight away. Do we throw in the towel because it's too hard? Or are we going to rally and try and persist with this task? Maybe even enjoy the challenge a little bit. Now, that's what self-regulation allows us to do in the immediate term. But there's different dimensions of self-regulation that we look at as well, and this is less talked about, these different dimensions of self-regulation. We often focus on the behavioral aspects and not necessarily on some of the others. But when we do these sorts of activities with children, like a memory card matching game, we're looking at, in one case, their cognitive self-regulation. So do they pay attention while we're explaining the activity during their turns? Well, they might pay attention during their turns. Do they also pay attention during other children's turns? Because that's also important to that kind of activity. Can they sustain that focus and stay engaged in the activity? Engagement being more than just are they paying attention to what's going on, but are they putting in some mental effort towards it? Maybe asking or answering questions or thinking about what to do next? Are they thoughtful and planful? Do they always just flip over the first two cards that are closest to them? Or will they take a second and think through what their next move might be? And can they be self-directed? This is also an element of self-regulation that we find is less talked about when we do our research and we speak to parents and educators. And that's what we often want in self-regulation is children to be able to enact these things independently eventually. That is, if we have rules for the activity, like you need to take turns, you flip just two cards, rather than constantly relying on us to say, yes, it's your turn, or remember we flipped two cards, we want them to be able to internalize those sequences and be able to do them themselves. So to what extent is a child self-directed? We look at behavioral aspects as well. Do children follow the rules of the situation and follow the directions that we give? Can they resist those urges and impulses? The children you see depicted here, in fact, I did bring your attention to the children on the earlier picture, but we specifically pulled out pictures of these lovely children who graciously played our memory game with us, about even in a single instant how you can see differences across aspects of cognitive self-regulation. We have children who are extremely excited and engaged to think the third child from the left maybe doesn't love playing the game with us so much at that moment. To behavioral self-regulation, you see quite a few differences as well. We also look at social and emotional aspects of self-regulation. Things like following social conventions, so taking turns and being helpful, responding to questions. Will children take measured risks? Now, we don't mean risks like I'm going to risk harming myself, but will they risk potentially being wrong? In conditions of uncertainty or where something's challenging and I might not be right or succeed in that first trial, will I still have a go? Will I put myself out there and try and risk being wrong and then learn from that? We also look at emotional reactions. But more than just emotional reactions, we look at emotional recovery as well. In this particular case, and we're going to show you a clip so you can actually see it play out in full. But in this particular case, we've gone one way around this memory card matching game. Our little gentleman on the left, who looks none too happy at this moment, was the first to go. And that's a hard spot to be in for a game like this. We haven't seen any cards yet, just randomly picking two. And he acknowledges that this is hard, but gives it a go. But then he pays very keen attention to everyone after that. And you can see when he recognizes that there's a pair. And he's anxious to get that pair. But he waits, and we go turn by turn by turn, until we reach our little lady on the far right, who finds a pair. And his reaction immediately was, no, for like half a second. But what he did after that was put a smile back on his face and kept engaging. Until Cathrine reminded everyone that when you get a pair, that means you get to go again. Oh. That was it. I could deal with the pair, but another turn is getting a bit too much, so he crosses his arms, spins all the way around from the game, and we see he's back for the next few seconds. But Cathrine left it. Wanted to see what he would do in that situation. And about 10 or so seconds later, what happens? Without any sort of support, he turns himself right back around, puts a smile back on his face, and re-engages in the game. Those are the sorts of things that we're interested in as well. Not just the emotional reactions and how children deal with frustration, but then how they respond to those emotional reactions as well, and how they recover from them. We wanted to show you a short clip that I just described, a little bit more than that even, but I want you to keep your attention broad. Even though I've drawn attention to our little gentleman on the left, I want you to try and pay attention to all the children and those different aspects of self-regulation that we just talked about. Paying attention and holding your attention and resisting distraction. Do they stay within the rules of the game? How do they deal with frustration? Look across those children and try and notice those different elements that we look at when we watch a game like this.
What we have to do now is I'm going to put them all down, face down, and we have to try and find the pairs. Now if I turn two over like this, so I'm going to turn this one over and this one over. And are they the same? No. So I have to turn them back over like that, and then someone else gets a turn. But if I turn them over and they're the same, guess what? I get to keep them. Yeah, I do. So that's called a matching memory game. Does everyone know what to do? Yeah. And we take turns. So the person sitting next to me goes first on that side. So who's that? Goes Kai. Then Lewis, you're next. And then after Lewis's turn, it's Burton's turn. And after Burton's turn, it's the beautiful Scarlet. And then when you're finished your turn, I'm not going to play. I'm just going to watch and see how clever you are. So then we go all the way back to Kai again. Okay. Is everybody ready? Yeah! Have we got our thinking caps on? Have we got our concentration eyes? Yeah. Are we ready to look? Are we ready to remember? And are we ready to take turns? Okay, let's go. And I'll tell you once I put them all out. Just so everyone can reach. This is a little bit exciting. Okay. It is hard, isn't it? It's a little bit tricky because you can't see it.
No.
So you've got to try and remember. So first turn, and it doesn't matter if they're not the same. You turn them back over, and then the next person has a go.
Yeah.
All right, you ready, Kai? You see if you can find two that are the same. And you can only turn two over. You're still going to wait because it's not your turn. I know, but you didn't turn that over. You just moved around a little bit. There we go. Turn them back. All right, Lewis. Remember, it's your turn when play's finished. Now it's your turn. It is a bit tricky. Are they the same? No. So what do we do? We turn them back over. And then it's Burton's turn. It's Burton's turn. That's right, Kai. Burton, your turn to try and find two that are the same.
It's gonna be a bit hard.
It is going to be a bit hard.
Yeah.
Are they the same, Burton?
No.
No. So what do we do? So we turn them back over. That's exactly right.
Wait, get them back
We
over.
flip them back over.
Let's
All right, Scarlett, it's your turn now. What have we got? It's our first pair. You get to keep that, Scarlett, and when you find a pair, you get another go. So would you like to have another turn? Okay. Just waiting for yours, aren't you? It is a bit tricky. Yeah. You've got to wait, Lewis, because whose turn is it after Scarlett? It's Kai's turn. Off you go, Kai. Ah! What do you do now? It's a pair, and what happens when you find a pair? You keep them, and you also get another turn. So do you want to have another turn? Are they the same? No. Flip them back over. Is it your turn now, Lewis? Yes. Are they the same? Wait for that touch. Would you like to go? No, he doesn't need to turn them back over because he gets to keep them. Are they the same version? No, they're not. So we turn them back over. Okay, Scarlett.
So when we do these sorts of activities, we're less concerned about who gets the most pairs. We're looking for the sorts of things that I flagged before. Do they pay attention when we're explaining the rules of the game? Do they sustain their attention not just during their turns, but during other children's turns as well? Can they stay within the confines and the rules and the structures of the activity? And how do they respond to frustration if they experience frustration? Now, these may seem a little bit elementary. They're lower level sort of self-regulatory behaviors, but self-regulation is hard. It's hard even for adults, and you've probably experienced this yourself as well. You come home from a tiring day, a long day, a hard day, and you might be a little bit short with others. It's hard to keep it together. And when you're not necessarily hungry, but there's food in front of you, so you keep nibbling the things in front of you. When you buy something that you might not need, but it's on sale, you can't miss this sale, it might not be on sale again, so I'm gonna go and buy it. I needed some photos for this particular slide, and I picked on Cathrine a little bit, if you haven't noticed. But I have a disclaimer. That top one, we were in the States visiting some colleagues, and we were at a New York Yankees game. And in reality, I'm the one who ate the majority of that bucket of chicken.
Okay, I had one piece, right? I'm just going to be very clear
I
on
said
that.
the majority.
The shoes, however, are mine. And it's only about a third of my collection.
Self-regulation is hard, even for adults. Children have even less control in terms of their self-regulation than we do. So that's a bit about what we mean by self-regulation when we're talking about self-regulation, and when we continue to talk about it tonight. The next question is, why are we so focused on self-regulation in particular? Why do we care about that and spend so much of our time on it? And it's because of all the research that tells us how important it is as a foundation for things that come later. All sorts of research that I could bore you with, and I won't. But there is one particular study that I find quite powerful. It's a study of 1,000 children that they started collecting information about when they were 3 years of age. They collected information about their self-regulation, as well as a whole bunch of other things. They followed those children from 3 years of age to the final time point that they collected information about them, 32 years of age. They followed 1,000 children for nearly 3 decades. And because they did that, it meant they could ask some really interesting questions. One of the questions that they focused on was, we know something about a child's self-regulation early in life, so how they're self-regulating at 3, 5 years of age. What do their outcomes look like when they're adults, when they're 32-year-olds? Do children who are better early self-regulators have better outcomes, or does it not matter? And what they found is that it does matter. So following from age 3, knowing something about a child's self-regulation at age 3, and then looking at what their outcomes look like at age 32, children who were better self-regulated early on tended to have better health, fewer medical conditions. They had better financial position, fewer credit problems. They tended to be more pro-social and less antisocial. They were less likely to be convicted of a crime. They had less substance use and abuse. And the list went on and on and on, which is quite powerful. That knowing something about someone 3 decades earlier is, at least on average, going to predict something that far later. It can also seem a bit concerning. I'm not 3 anymore. So does that mean I am the self-regulator that I am? Because they followed the children, they were able to do another set of analyses as well. And that's, what about children who improved in their self-regulation for whatever reason? They weren't working with the children to try and improve their self-regulation, but they had the data to say some of these children got better in their self-regulation. What happens with those children? Well, their analysis showed that the children that improve in self-regulation in early childhood, for whatever reason, tend to have better outcomes as well. That full range of outcomes improved along with it. So it suggests that self-regulation can change. We can do things to support it. And when we do, it's not just self-regulation into the right now that it shifts, but it can help to shift a wide range of outcomes later on as well.
So what the research tells us is about 30% of Australian children when they start school have a history of persistent self-regulatory challenges. So what we know is that a child who is able to pay attention, remember instructions, control their emotions, follow needs and wants of others, and also actually able to share their toys or communicate effectively are said to be ready for school. Actually, in fact, from that research, we know that they're ready for life. So if we lay those foundations really significantly early, what we're doing is we're setting up our children for success, both at school, but in terms of life. So that begs the question, if these skills are so fundamental to children's success, how do children learn to control their emotions and behaviour and attention? What we know is this is not something that happens overnight. It's a gradual process that happens throughout the child's life, and particularly around those first 5 years of a child's life. So children are not born with the ability to share their toys or to control their emotions or behaviours. They are, however, born with the potential to do this. And whether or not they reach that potential depends largely on the environments in which they're exposed to. And when we talk about environments, the most significant environment for a child's self-regulation is the home learning environment. The quality of the parenting that they're exposed to and the quality of the relationships they form within that family. The second most important context in your child's life is the early childhood education and care context. So they're the two most important contexts in terms of shaping your child's learning and trajectory. Now, we only need to look at the brain research to show why those first 5 years of your child's life is so significant. So I want you to think about the birth of a baby. So when two babies are born, and if we were to look at a scan on their brains are almost identical in size and weight. If we fast forward 3 years, and we look at the size and weight of two babies' brains, they are very different. And that difference can be attributed solely to the quality of the environments in which they're exposed. So when we talk about self-regulation, you've all heard the nature-nurture debate, and nowhere is that more present than in the area of self-regulation. So our genes provide the blueprint of how we're going to turn out. But ultimately, what we look like in terms of our self-regulatory behaviours depends largely on the environment. So if we have rich and supportive and responsive environments, and environments that are conducive to developing these skills, then we see rich connections in the brain. The flip side is that if you're exposed to poor environments, or you're neglected and you don't have these positive experiences, what we actually see that the brain atrophies, it actually dies. And it shrinks in size, and that permanently impacts the quality of the relationships that children develop over their lifespan. So the first 5 years are critical. So given the trajectory in terms of brain growth and development, we know that there are certain stages in a child's life that are particularly sensitive to developing certain types of skills. So you think about a newborn baby, which we've got a lovely example here. The first 12 months of your child's life is critical for the development of attachment relationships, okay? And the type of attachment relationship that your baby forms lays the foundations for the expectations of what they get from other relationships. So the message is, if you have a close relationship with your baby, the message is, you are worthwhile, you're someone that people want to spend time with, and you take that expectation into the relationships that you form with others. When it comes to self-regulation, our window of opportunity for massive growth and development is between the ages of 3 and 5. And there's a couple of reasons because of that. So if we think about our brain development happens in a number of directions. So there's these two principles called cephalocaudal and proximal distal. And it talks about direction of growth. So cephalocaudal is the top-down direction of growth. So you think about when a baby's born, the first part of their body that they learn to control is their head. And then it moves down in that direction, so then they learn to sit up on their own, first of all with support and then on their own, and then they learn to crawl, and then you learn to walk. So it's that level of control. Proximal distal talks about it in and out. So if you think of baby again, the first thing that they learn is they flap their arms around. And then they start to develop control of their hands, and we call it the almond rats. And then eventually they become development of much more of their fine motor skills and pincer. The same thing happens with the brain. So the brain develops on the outwards. And the last part of the brain that continues to develop right through to adolescence and adulthood is what we call our prefrontal cortex. And that is where all our executive functions happening. That are very important in self-regulation. And that is why self-regulatory skills are so susceptible to environmental influence and the quality of experiences that children are afforded to. And that's exciting because it means we can do something about it and that we have control over our children's self-regulatory abilities. So getting back to the brain, and this is the kind of graphs that us who work in early childhood really love. Because what it says to us is the younger the child is, the more ready they are to learn. The brain is primed for learning in those early years. And the younger the child is, the less amount of effort that we need to put in as parents and educators to change behaviours or to teach behaviours. So think about an adult, maybe it might be your husband or your wife, and a behaviour that you want to change, and they're in their 30s. It's really hard to change those behaviours, right? Or think about learning a new skill, learning skiing or riding a bike when you're in your early 20s. I still remember I learnt skiing when I was around 16 and my dad took me to Austria. I remember lining up to go on the T-bars, and these little 3 and 4-year-olds used to jump the queue, then undo your spokes so your boots would come out, and they'd be off skiing in front of you. You are ready to learn. Your brain is designed for learning, particularly in those early years. But because of that fast growth, it also means children are most susceptible to negative experiences as well, to both positive and negative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do as part of your parenting approach to support children in terms of developing self-regulation skills. But we thought it might be interesting to first to check what your self-regulation skills are like. And we thought we might do a little experiment called the Stroop task.
Here we have the Stroop task, which is a good adult measure of our ability to self-regulate or resist impulses. The impulse in this case is we have learned very well to read written words. That's all we do. When's the last time you opened a book and said, I'm going to check out what the ink color of these words is? You read the words as they are on the page. Except in the Stroop task, we want you to do something entirely different. That is, we want you to read those ink colors. How well can you overcome that very strongly learned tendency to read the written word? And we look at the difference between those two as a measure of your ability to control impulses, or your self-regulation, your inhibition. So I'm going to ask for a brave volunteer. You might want to try it out just so you can feel what it's like to try and control this sort of really strong impulse. I will pick someone if I have to. So what we want you to do, left to right, top line, second line.
But read the word first. So go through it first. No, I want you to say the word.
And we're going to count that down, and then we're going to get you to do the ink color. It's the difference between the two. So read the words first. Ready?
Yep.
Set?
Yep.
Go.
Black, blue, orange, black,
As fast as you can.
yellow,
There we go.
blue, blue, green, green, yellow, red, yellow, black, orange, red, orange, black, yellow, black, green, red, blue, red, black, blue, red, yellow, green, blue, orange, orange, green, blue, yellow, green, black, yellow, blue, orange, yellow.
All right. So the stopwatch in my head said that was 27 seconds. Which is good. Now we're going to flip it.
I'm already struggling.
This time, as fast as you can, without making any mistakes, I want you to read the ink colors. Left to right, top row, and then down. Ready? Go.
Yellow, red, blue, orange, green, black, green, red, orange, black, yellow, black, orange, yellow, red. Keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, red, black, blue. It's really hard. Green, yellow, blue, green, black, red, orange, red, yellow, red, blue, orange, black, green, red, yellow, blue, black, red, blue, green, black, orange.
Hey. The stopwatch in my head said that one was a little bit longer.
I cheated because I have pretty good eyesight, but I really tried
So you can't read the words anymore, you can just see the colors. It's hard. It's hard to overcome these sorts of impulses, even as adults. So imagine if you have even less capacity to overcome. Now, we've answered some of the questions we set out so far. We've told you about what we mean by self-regulation when we're talking about self-regulation. We've talked about why self-regulation is important for right now and for the future. We've talked a bit about how self-regulation develops, and we've said that we can change it, which is really positive and really exciting. We've told you nothing about how to change it yet. So that's what we're going to focus on for the remainder of tonight. Now, I want to say that there's all sorts of different approaches that are currently out there. And the widespread ones have a number of limitations to picking them up and using them. So things like computerized brain training. I think every time I look at the iTunes App Store, there's a new brain training app that they've just released. But they tend to be really time-consuming. If you're going to do these with young children, and there's not even many for young children, but if you're going to, it's something you need to accommodate in your day, something new that I need to fit in. They're often quite expensive, they're often quite time-consuming, and really, if we look across the evidence is pretty modest for the sorts of effects we want on the outcomes we're interested in. There's curricular approaches, curricula like tools of the mind, which early childhood education and care services could pick up. But they're quite comprehensive. If you were to do a curriculum like that, that is now your curriculum. That is what you do. So it doesn't fit into the things that you do already and every day, and things that are inexpensive. That's our focus. So rather than these sorts of approaches, we spend our time trying to work out what are the things that we can do with the things that already happen in a child's day. How can we leverage those to get some self-regulatory benefits in a way that we don't have to do something new in our day or find new time, in a way that's not going to cost us anything to do, or if we need to buy some sort of resource, it's really, really cheap. Those are the things that we focus on to say, how can we get the most benefit for a child's self-regulation in the child's everyday?
So the good news is you don't actually have to go out and spend a lot of money after today to support self-regulation, and you don't need a separate curriculum. What we know is the most effective way that parents and teachers can support the development of self-regulation skills is just through modelling and communication and scaffolding activities. So things like when it's time to eat dinner and you're all set at the table, get everyone to wait until everyone's sat down and then start eating together. So there's lots of things that we can do. So I want to talk a little bit about that. We talk about growth-promoting environments, so environments that support self-regulation. But as parents, and particularly when children are learning, so those early stages of self-regulation, we want to minimise the challenges that children face. So if we think about the developmental progression of self-regulation, we move from a stage of what we call other-regulated. So when babies are first born, they're regulated by you as adults. So you decide when they're going to eat, where they're going to go. I like to say that we decide when they go to sleep, but that doesn't always happen, having been the mother of 3 non-sleepers. But they're dependent on you. And then they move to a stage of what we call co-regulation, where you support them in that regulation of behaviours. And then from around 3, they start developing the skills and the capacity to regulate themselves. And self-regulation refers to those behaviours that children do independent of whether or not an adult is present. And that's when children are truly self-regulated. So when they're going through that early stages of regulation, you want to minimise those conditions that make it really tricky. Think about the times when children tantrum. Tantruming is often an indicator that the emotions that the child is feeling are so big that they're not able to control them. So it's often an indication of being poorly emotionally regulated. Now, that's completely normal for a child under the age of 3. You wouldn't expect a 2-year-old to be able to control their emotions. We would, however, want to support a 4-year-old to be able to control their emotions. So it's important to have what we call developmentally realistic expectations of children's behaviour. So children often will tantrum when they're tired, when they're hungry, or even as adults we talk about being hangry. Like our patience is not so good when we're really hungry. Or I think of my own approaches to parenting. I've come home from work, I've got a paper due, I've been teaching all day, I haven't had my third coffee. So and I know that my call to action at home with my children is often their behaviour. And I don't always stop and think and ask questions. I'll parent straight away without really knowing what their clear situation was. And that's the same what we see with children. So when they're overwhelmed or when they're sick, it makes it very difficult for them to regulate their emotions. Sometimes we have control over this and sometimes we don't. So things like moving house, birth of a sibling, parental divorce, all of those can be highly stressful. And when those things happen, what we say to parents is just shift your expectations of what children are capable of doing when you can't actually control that. Another one is to think about our own reactions to children's behaviour. And in terms of illustrating this, I'm going to actually share with you an experiment. Now this was an experiment that happened back in the 1960s in Stanford, and it was first conducted by Walter Mischel. And he looked at a group of children between 3 and 5, and what he said to them is, you can have this one marshmallow now, or you can wait 20 minutes, and I'll give you 2 marshmallows. And what he found with these children is those who could wait did much better academically, they did better socially, and they were actually much more successful in terms of their relationships during adolescence than those who ate the marshmallow straight away.
And they're so adorable to watch.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have 2. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay?
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
All right, so it's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay.
How are your own chocolates doing?
Has anyone had a chocolate yet? Yeah. How's those relationships going? You can have your chocolates now. For those of you who held on. But I just want to make one point about that. So here we can actually see that self-regulation is developmental, that it's influenced by environment. So even with adults, there's been a lot of experiments around the street test where we've got people to do it when they're tired, when they're hungry, when there's other external influences, and it affects your performance. I also want to think about our approach to parenting. How many of us go shopping with our children and we say, if you behave, go to the sushi train after, or if you behave, I might buy you this. And sometimes you don't follow through on that. So one thing we notice with children is that the experiences that they have historically through parenting can shape their expectations in the future. So imagine a child who's constantly promised that they'll get something, but it never comes. What's it going to do to that child's self-regulation? What are you going to do? I'm going to eat that marshmallow straight away, because I know that second marshmallow is never coming. So you can actually be working, for those of you who are with educators in this room, I know there's kind of some educators and parents, sometimes you might be working with a child who's been constantly promised the second marshmallow and never comes. So it's going to shape their expectations, and it's going to influence their ability to self-regulate. And when it comes to self-regulation, and particularly social-emotional skills, it's quite unique within children's development. So we learn how to read, we learn how to be numerate. But when it comes to social-emotional skills, it involves learning of skills, but it also involves unlearning. So shifting our expectations as well. So it's quite a complex area of development. One of the most powerful tools that educators use in teaching children is modelling. And when that modelling is paired with communication, so when we make explicit our intentions and expectations, it becomes even more powerful. So imagine we've got children are sitting on the ground, another child comes over and there's no room to sit there, like watching television or playing a game. So for me, for modelling, what I would say is, David's coming over and there's no room for David, so I'm going to move over so David can sit next to me. The next time David comes over and there's no room, Sally saw me do that and she heard me explain it previously. So Sally will say, I'm just going to move over for you, David, so you can sit next to me. So it's important. You are your child's most important role model. And young children are sponges. They take everything in. But we also need to explain our behaviour, and often we talk in quite abstract terms. So we'll say to a 3-year-old, pay attention. What does that mean to a 3-year-old? So if you're reading a book, you might say, I'm paying attention to the book. I'm sitting still, my eyes are looking at the book, and I'm listening. So we describe what we're doing. It's also important, self-regulation is about taking risks. So Steve talked about that notion of measured risks. But it's also about learning from our mistakes. So it's important to model for children when you make mistakes. Hold a book, hold it upside down and let them correct you when you're reading a story at night. Or put things in the wrong place. Or let them know when you're trying to do something really tricky and you might not succeed. Learning to persist in a challenging task is probably one of the most important outcomes of self-regulation. And that is why self-regulation is linked to academic achievement. So rather than giving up when something's too tricky, like a puzzle or trying to read, scaffold your child, support them, and help them to achieve that with some support. But that's also, a second part of that is making sure that the tasks that they do are developmentally appropriate. So if things are too tricky for children and they continually fail, that can also impact on their self-regulation and their ability to try and take challenges. Teaching children self-regulation also requires good adult regulation. And sometimes you see your behaviour mirrored back to you, right? And it's often the behaviours that you least want to see mirrored back to you.
Up from the ground to see your sad and teary eyes. You look away from me and I see there's something you're trying to hide. And I reach for your hand but it's cold. You pull away again and I wonder what's on your mind. And then you say to me you made a dumb mistake. You start to tremble and your voice begins to break. You say the cigarettes on the counter weren't your friends, they were my mates. And I feel the colour draining from my face. And my friend said, I know you love her but it's over, mate. It doesn't matter, put the phone away. It's never easy.
And I guess I cannot emphasize that enough. Children learn through modelling, and you are their most powerful model. When they start to get to school, peers take over a little bit, but until school age, parents are the most important role model in your child's life, and particularly important in terms of self-regulation, so it's reflecting on our own behaviours as well. Are you doing it at the same time? Get your hands off there. Last thing I want to actually talk about, speaking about self-regulation, is about providing children opportunity for planning. So self-regulation is about problem solving and knowing that you have other options. So Sally wanted the magic wand because she wanted to be a magic princess. But Jenny's got the magic wand. So I might say to Sally, let's use this cake and it can be a magic cake. Now a child who's self-regulated will be able to shift their plans and say, yeah, it's okay, I'll wear the magic cake. A child who is challenged with their self-regulation is likely to have an emotional meltdown about not getting that magic wand, because they're not able to shift their plans. So we can do things like, David, you said you were going to make a cubby. What do you think you'll need for the cubby? So helping children make plans and follow through on plans is really important for children's self-regulation. You've got a morning at home with mum or dad. What would you like to do today? Let's make a plan. Let's make a list. Young children, give them choices and give them realistic choices. So they might choose what they're going to wear that morning and make it a proper choice, with the idea is that you've got to let them, if they want to wear their pyjamas all day because that's what they chose, that's okay. The younger the child is, the more limited choices. So a 3-year-old, you're only going to give them a choice out of 2 things. A 5-year-old, you might give them more open-ended choices about what they're going to do. But it's about following through on those plans and helping them to understand that there are different options. We saw the impact of planning in that memory game. So Lewis, who kept turning over the same cards, right? He didn't have that planning ability, and you can see how it impacts on your success, being able to plan. And lastly, we just want to finish off this evening talking about a few activities. And when it comes to self-regulation, practice makes perfect. So it's about giving children lots of opportunities to practice being self-regulated, to practice being able to control their emotions, to direct their attention, to problem solve, to follow instructions, to share, to communicate their needs and wants. So it's also important to think about the different types of regulation. So we're going to get you all to stand for a moment. You'll see that and I'm going to get you to stand because it's late at night. And you'll see that everyone has some musical instruments in front of them. Now this is a behavioural regulation game. So I'm going to be your conductor and I'll explain what you need to do. So this is my conductor stick. And when I move it slowly, I would like you to play your instruments slowly. And when I move it fast, I would like you to play your instruments fast. Are we ready? So in terms of self-regulation, it's about following instructions. And now I'd like to make it a little bit challenging. So this is a little bit like a strict task, but for children. So when I move my stick slowly, I would like you to play your instruments fast. And when I move it fast, I'd like you to play your instruments slowly. Are we ready? Children in terms of following instructions, but inhibiting a natural response because it takes more control and more attention and more effort. So these are the kinds of things that we can do.
So in terms of our cognitive self-regulation, there's things we can do to help sustain and focus attention as well. So one of the activities that we've talked about in terms of cognitive self-regulation, we call market mix-up. And in market mix-up, what we're doing is we're having a make-believe play situation with the child where we're going shopping for some ingredients to make dinner. And the child is choosing what they want to make and the things we might need to make it. So once we've got our ingredients, and we might start with just a few ingredients, something that's pretty easy to make, we go to the checkout, and at the checkout, oh no, I've made a mistake. I've put the bag with the other bags and I can't remember which one's yours. I don't want to give you the wrong bag, so can you tell me what are the things that were in your bag? Things to help them focus and sustain their attention and control their thinking over a period of time.
Now, all of these activities we have on the website that we're going to give you that you can access freely. And there's also stories up the back as well that have those incorporated into it. So thinking about the different aspects, so we've thought of behavioural regulation, cognitive regulation, and the last part of regulation is about control of our emotions. So when children are younger, you first want to support them to understand what emotions look like. So you need to understand emotions first. And then we need to support them in terms of the control of emotions. So often we'll talk to children about emotions in terms of understanding. So for instance, a child might knock their blocks over accidentally and get very upset. We might say to David, you know what, I can see that you're really frustrated that your tower fell down because you spent a lot of time building that. So either we can stop and we can build it again, or we can go and do something else. So it's about giving them words for their emotions. But there's also an activity that we do with children called Actors Studio. And that's where we actually give them a little story and we get them to act out what the emotions were. So Cathrine, one day, went online and she found out that her favourite shoe shop was having a sale. She very excitedly turned the computer off, went down to her car and got in, put her seatbelt on, which she doesn't always do before she starts driving, and then she drove very carefully down the road. When she got to her favourite shoe shop, she went in and she found a pair of red heels that she'd been looking at for 2 weeks. And then when she asked for her size, they didn't have it in stock. So how do you think Steve was feeling? What emotions do we see? And so that's what we'd say to children. So you can actually go through those emotions and help them to identify those. You can do it just one-on-one, but you can also do it with a group of children. So that's just a little taster for you tonight about what self-regulation looks like, how you can actually support it, and some of the activities. So now we'd just like to open the floor if anyone has any questions or comments. We're good?
So I have a question, because you talked about, and I wrote this down right at the start, I know you mentioned like age-appropriate expectations and development. So, like, how do you know? Like, you know, I have a 4-year-old who's displaying some aspects of self-regulation and clearly at other times is completely not. Like, at what point do you give them space to try to work through it, and at what point do you intervene? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you
That's a really good question. So, and it's a span. So I guess when we're talking about self-regulation, it's not appropriate to expect a child under 3 to be self-regulated. So it's really, they're starting to develop those self-regulation skills from 3. And that's partly because they're moving from the I of toddlerhood, so it's all about me, to the we or us that happens in preschool. So they're much more aware, and you need to be aware of your audience and others' needs and wants, because you're not going to put a toy away that you want to keep playing with it unless you understand that someone else wants it. So it's about understanding their development, and then it's around scaffolding those experiences. So it's thinking about when do you need to step in. So you saw in that video that I actually didn't respond to him turning his back on me straight away. So you wait. It's about scaffolding children, giving them time to recover or giving them time to control their emotions. And then you wait till you see that you actually need to step in. And sometimes you do. So it's about taking cues from your child and extending it just beyond what that you think that they can achieve on their own. Did you want to jump in, Steve?
So currently there's on average 1 in 4 children that are exposed to domestic and family violence. So that situation for children often doesn't change for them. And you're looking at the brain development and how that can completely impact it. So in an educational setting, when you can't necessarily influence the home environment, how are you going to support self-regulate?
That's a very good question. So I'm going to say a few things. I'll say a few points to that. That without a doubt, the home learning environment is probably the most important environment in terms of their child's life. We do, however, know that very high quality early childhood education and care can compensate for poor environments at home. And if the quality is high enough, you can actually shift a child's developmental trajectory. In saying that, and for those of you who are educators will know that one of the strong indicators of quality are ratios. Okay? So it's looking at the number of children that you have to a staff member. When you are learning to self-regulate, and the behaviours that we are showing here, I would never work with a group of more than 4. So we are teaching because they need those responsive behaviours. Now, when you're learning to self-regulate, most children will do it at 3. If you have a child who has a history of violence, they're not going to be ready to self-regulate at 3. They're probably not going to be quite ready until 5. So it's around your ratios and responsiveness. So it's shifting your expectations, providing more support, making it more scaffolded, and reducing the size of groups. So when you're doing activities, big activities, you're going to know that that child's going to need some support. So they're going to need another adult there because they're still in that co-regulated state. So they're going to need an adult to help them to regulate their emotions because they're not going to be able to do it by themselves. So it shifts their developmental timetable. It's like a short answer. Some children who have extreme exposure actually need more intensive support around supporting self-regulation. But that is one of the outcomes that we do see around exposure to violence. We see much higher rates of aggressive behaviour in these children and quite poor behaviour. Not always cognitive regulation, but quite poor behaviour and emotional regulation. Thanks for that, Judy. Did you want to add?
Oh, just, I guess the only other thing that I'd add is part of that quality picture where high quality early childhood education and care matters. Part of that ingredient is a safe space for the child, where we talked about the things that can hijack self-regulation, not just for children, but for adults. If that is a safe place that they feel supported and we can try and pull out some of those factors that are going to undermine their self-regulation, they'll at least be at their personal best ability to self-regulate and more receptive to our efforts to try and shift it than if they don't feel safe, or they don't feel supported, or they feel sad, or they feel scared.
Yeah. That's with any form of learning, that the basis for effective learning is high quality relationships, responsive relationships with children. And if you don't have that, then it's hard to actually develop any kind of other skills.
So, children are under 3 then, what's the, we've got a 2-year-old who's, I guess, a typical 2-year-old reacting to situations with
I talk about 2-year-olds are high on will and low on skill.
So, what can we be doing with her at this age that would assist her in leading to when we can do more of the kind of work around the 3 to 5 year age, and then also are there any good techniques for managing that kind of behaviour in a 2-year-old that isn't necessarily at that cognitive point of being able to understand the situation?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to 2-year-olds, one of the key things is thinking about our environments and minimising challenges in the environment that place challenges. So I often say the best way to deal with challenging behaviour is to make sure that it doesn't happen in the first place. So it's around minimising those challenges, so making sure that they don't get too overtired, hungry, overstimulated. So a really common feedback from parents, and I've experienced myself having 3 children, that you often get the tantrum at parties because they're so overexcited. Like stress it's a good stress, but they're very overexcited, so it's hard to kind of manage their behaviours. So it's about thinking about the environments, but a lot of those activities you can start doing with a 2-year-old one-on-one. So obviously with the musical activity, you just get them to pay attention and copy. You're not going to get them to inhibit the response, so that's more challenging. So you can actually start doing things, or wait till everyone's sitting down at the table before you start, or introducing little steps and routines. So you can actually start giving a 2-year-old choices. an option.
already do.
Yeah, because they want to make choices. They have difficulties making choices.
Yeah.
But they want to make
They
choices.
make the choice for the
So, did you?
Yeah, one of the good ones that we've seen a lot that can go younger and can go older is a very common one, musical statues, or where the music plays and you dance, and when the music stops you freeze. Where we've tended to see that happen, one of two things happens. Music stops and some children don't stop dancing, and you just let that go and put the music back on and away we go. So there's no actual consequence or repercussion of not stopping. Or there's a really heavy repercussion that you're out because you didn't stop dancing, which means that the child who perhaps could have used the most practice in terms of self-regulation got the least opportunity to. So even minimal modifications to those sorts of activities where rather than being out, if you don't freeze, there is still a consequence, but that consequence is now I'm going to go down to my knees, so I'm taking my legs out of the situation. And now it's my torso and my arms and my head. And if I don't stop again, well then I'm going on to my bottom and then laying down. But every time I succeed, I get to move up one step. Even those sorts of modifications, and then you get that sort of practice too.
Or even rules, having rules. So once children hit about 2, they're starting to be able to follow rules. So having little rules at home is a great process as well. I'm happy to keep answering questions and both of us are, but I am conscious that some people may need to get home to family and children. So I just going to pause for a moment because often people don't want to leave because they feel like they're being rude. So I'm just going to give people a moment if you'd like to leave. Feel free to do so now. And then if you still have questions, Steve and I are happy just to hang around down the front and you can just come and speak to us personally if you'd like.
Thank you, everybody.